Good morning. Good morning to those of you who are making your way into the Great Hall and those of you who are making your way online. It is good to gather on this Sunday morning at Calvary and in the virtual world of Calvary out there all together. My name is Catherine Bush, part of the clergy team here at Calvary Episcopal Church in downtown Memphis. And today we're going to talk a little bit about gratitude. It's the week, right, for Thanksgiving and the week for gathering and eating and all of the things for so many of us, although we know that we remember that that's not everyone's privilege. But I did think that we would start the week before maybe all of that, all the joy and the chaos of that comes at us, and reflect a little bit on Thanksgiving. So we will start with the prayer from the prayer book. This is called the General Thanksgiving. It's one of the prayers in the back. It's a personal favorite and has some really lovely language. And if you're ever with us on morning prayer, I know it's my usual Thanksgiving blessing. I feel like it's your usual Thanksgiving concluding prayer at morning prayer. So, the Lord be with you. How do I take this out? Just help it. Okay. All right. This way I can turn around and still talk. Accept, O Lord, our thanks and praise for all that you have done for us. We thank you for the splendor of the whole creation, for the beauty of this world, for the wonder of life, and for the mystery of love. We thank you for the blessing of family and friends, and for the loving care which surrounds us on every side. We thank you for setting us at tasks which demand our best efforts, and for leading us to accomplishments which satisfy and delight us. We thank you also for those disappointments and failures that lead us to acknowledge our dependence on you alone. Above all, we thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, for the truth of his word and the example of his life, for his steadfast obedience by which he overcame temptation, for his dying through which he overcame death, and for his rising to life again in which we are raised to the life of your kingdom. Grant us the gift of your Spirit, that we may know Christ and make him known, and through him at all times and in all places may give thanks to you in all things. Amen. So not only is this one of, one of the more beautiful offerings in a book that is full of beautiful offerings, it also very aptly names in detailed ways the beauty of this world and our experience. And those of us, like I said, who are lucky and fortunate to be surrounded by friends and family, to acknowledge the beautiful world in which we live. And it also acknowledges that it's not all roses, right? That there are sufferings, that there's disappointments, that there's failures, and that somehow we might learn to give thanks for those things as well. And we'll get into a little bit of that as we converse this morning. So this presentation is a combination of some quick study on my part in the world of psychology and the benefits of gratitude practices. And then a little bit of we'll acknowledge the kind of biblical thread through there, and then of course we'll read some poetry, and see how all of these things kind of come together to feed us, and to feed an idea and a conversation around gratitude. So when I'm talking about anything remotely scientific, I'm probably quoting Roger Emmons from USC Davis, so credit to him, because I didn't know all of this. And the theological implications are some of my own, but again, none of that's original. We don't make up theology very often around here. So the two things that I want to start with are these two magnifying aspects. The first is that there is goodness in the world. When we give thanks, what we are doing is acknowledging goodness. That's plain and simple. That's it. And so that there is goodness in the world, and it is an affirmation of goodness. We affirm that there are good things in the world, gifts and benefits that we have received. This is really important, this next part. This doesn't mean that life is perfect. It doesn't ignore complaints, burdens, and hassles. But when we look at life as a whole, gratitude encourages us to identify some amount of goodness in our life. And sometimes that goodness maybe takes up most of the space. Sometimes that goodness maybe only takes up a sliver, and it feels like the complaints and burdens and hassles take up a larger proportion. But acknowledging one doesn't dismiss the other. Both things can be true at the same time, this idea of both and, that we can have hassles and pain and suffering, disappointments and failures, as the prayer said, and we can have goodness, and we can acknowledge blessing, and we can see beauty. And that when we talk about one, we're not negating the other. We're not dismissing the other. We're not pretending like it's all one way or all the other. That we are, as small as our brains are capable of holding two things or even more than two things that can be true at the same time, right? That there is goodness, and that doesn't mean that it's not hard sometimes out there. The second piece of this, of a gratitude practice, acknowledging that there's goodness and that it comes from outside of ourselves. Now, I can do a whole lot of things that can make me happy. The other day, I put my winter coat on, and I was running around the house, and I couldn't find my gloves because it's the first time I needed them. And then I stuck my hands in my pockets, and there were my gloves. I did that for me in March, right? So thanks, me. Most of the things, though, that are good and lovely in my life come from outside of my own efforts that I'm the beneficiary of. So we go on. We recognize the sources of this goodness as being outside of ourselves. It didn't stem from anything we necessarily did ourselves in which we might take pride, except for my gloves being in the pocket. We can appreciate positive traits in ourselves. That's what I'm doing. But I think true gratitude involves a humble dependence on others. We acknowledge that other people, or even higher powers, you can see this person is not assuming a religious mindset, I do. If you're of a spiritual mindset, that others or even higher powers gave us many gifts, big and small, to help us achieve the goodness in our lives. So as much as we might want to say, hey, good job, self, a lot of a gratitude practice is an acknowledgement that we are not lone actors, that we are not isolated, that we don't live in vacuums, that we're not disconnected, but rather that we are profoundly connected and dependent, again, back to that language of the prayer, dependent on God, dependent on the gifts and kindnesses of others known to us and strangers who will never know, who slow down so we can merge in, right? So grateful for that moment. Or the gifts given to us by past generations that we are now able to enjoy. So these two things. One, that there is goodness in the world, and that it often comes from outside of ourselves. So a few more comments. When we stop and give thanks, what we are doing is magnifying that moment. Much like Mary in the Magnificat, my soul magnifies the Lord. She wasn't just able to have this experience of, I'm going to carry a child and somehow it's going to be hard and amazing and all of these things. But I'm going to magnify God for that gift. And when we do that, when we appreciate something, we continue celebrating instead of just adapting and adjusting. So often when something happens in our lives, when we receive something, we just, like I put on my coat and I'm like, oh, I'm warm. And then I don't continue to think about being warm. I've adjusted. I'm glad not to be cold anymore. I put my coat on, I'm warm, and I move on. But when we pause to give thanks, we stretch that out a little bit, right? So we don't just get warm, but we say, wow, I'm really grateful to be warm. And the taking just the half second to do that stretches it out and grows it some. So we don't just adapt and adjust and move on, but we appreciate and that magnifies the thing itself. Though we can do a lot of things at the same time, walking and chewing gum and all of these kind of things, it is actually difficult, maybe not impossible, but it's really hard to be grateful and envious at the same time. So again, stopping to give thanks, to appreciate something in that particular moment kind of, it blocks out, thinking about Jerry and Jackson right now, like blocking the shot, right? Like blocks out those thoughts of envy and comparison, of just feeling like I don't have enough, of feeling kind of empty. And so, because it's hard to give thanks and simultaneously be envious or feel less than at the same time. Our psychologist friends will tell us that a regular gratitude practice can actually build up a resistance to stress, that it can create some resilience within us. And the last piece of this the kind of the science part of it, is that there's a reciprocal effect. So it's not just that I express gratitude, but the more that I express gratitude, and I give thanks for Heidi, and I give thanks for Paul, and I give thanks for Dave, and I give that I'm also then, maybe in the back of my head, there's a little bit of a message that says, I wonder if anybody's grateful for me. And actually maybe so. And even if I don't know it, that I can begin to kind of imagine that possibility. And so then there's this kind of looping reciprocal benefit of, if you assume a grateful posture, then you can kind of apply that to others and think that you kind of live in this world of gratitude. Any of these in particular strike you, or can you think of examples in your own life? I'm going to ask you to talk just a little bit about one or two of these pieces when you're like, oh yeah, I have a real concrete example of when that was true. Anybody have a moment where they or an experience? Yeah, thanks. That's perfect. Teeny tiny is best.
So when you go into the bathroom and someone has already pushed the paper towels down,
Right? Yeah.
and then you just pay it forward.
Pay it forward, right? That's exactly right. And it is and if we walk through our day looking for all of those teeny little things, then it just kind of changes our mindset, and we start looking for those things, right? Yeah, Bill.
I like it when the toilet is full.
Yeah, right? We have a lot of bathroom examples. Okay, all right. Okay, good. Yeah. Anyone else? I didn't think we were going to go there, but that's great. That's good. All right. Okay. So, being grateful is not, like Kermit said, it's not always easy being green. It's not always easy being grateful. And there's some reasons for this. Not only because it's hard out there, but because it goes against our self-serving bias when we attribute that gratitude to someone else, when we give credit to someone else. This is that kind of like that insidious message that says, I did this on my own. I got here on my own. My efforts resulted in this. And there's something strong in us that wants to believe that that's true. We want to give ourselves credit. I want to pat myself on the back, not just for the gloves in my pocket, but I want credit, right, for all the things. And so to express gratitude compels us to say, oh, I'm not in this by myself. I'm the beneficiary of so much, whether it's the paper towels or generational wealth. I mean, like all of it, right? Like I didn't do much on my own. I don't live in a vacuum disconnected. It can also go against our need for control. Again, that thinking that like I'm in charge of all of this and I'm gonna set the tone and I'm gonna do the things and it's gonna go the way I want it. Sometimes these good things, these blessings just rain down on us. And that can be lovely, but it can also be a little disconcerting in this sense of, well, how did all of this happen? Well, it's not me. It's outside of my control. And then this last one I think is the most tricky for me. It goes against our ideas of a just world. So we could talk all day about whether or not the world is just and balanced. But oftentimes, so many, we receive things not because we did anything to deserve them. And they may be the big things or they may be the small things. But that we just gain from the efforts of others, from the work of others, from the kindness of others. And there's a kind of a little tricky shadow in there of kind of acknowledging, wow, things are just kind of, well, they're uneven. They're not all just and squared away. The balance sheets don't always come out the way they ought to, in a way. And I'll add here a little bit of my thoughts on karma. Not that you asked, but I have profound respect for the contributions and theologies and ideas that come to us from these other rivers of religion. The idea of karma is a tricky one. It suggests that what we put out, we get back, right? Like that I do this, and it might be immediate and it might be later. And that idea, while we can certainly find examples of it, and it certainly does happen that sometimes there is this like tit for tat, and this, I did that, and the necessary consequences of my actions, good or bad, look like this. But I actually am really grateful to live inside a worldview that pushes back on that and says that sometimes we don't get what we deserve. Or that the things that happen to me are not necessarily, and this can happen too when really terrible things happen to us. I don't want to think that that I did something, I sinned, I did something that then, so now this is my punishment. That's a really hard, harsh world to live in. In the world of grace and the world of acknowledging that it's just a little more random than that. Sometimes the consequences are just and even, and they come on time, and sometimes they don't. And usually, that's often, if not usually, that's often to our benefit, that we just receive goodness, not because we did anything to deserve it. So, any of these particularly strike you, or something that you don't have to necessarily tell us your deep struggles, but something about that really hits home for you? One of these things that make it hard to be grateful? Yeah.
Well, I know the self-serving bias to get credit tied with the just world, and when I get that moment of thinking I said what I'm going to say the thing instead of everybody's, it never feels that good.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's this illusion that that's going to feel really good to get justice for me, rather than be grateful for what I didn't deserve.
Right. Yeah.
That mindset is really satisfying.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful. And that, what we think is going to make us feel better is not usually what makes us feel better in those darker moments. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how do we do gratitude? How do we express gratitude? I mean, y'all, Oprah was right. Of course, gratitude journals are a thing, and it doesn't have to be pretty, and it doesn't have to even be a journal and bound, but just taking a half second to write down one or two things that you're grateful for as a practice, then is an exercise, like any exercise that we do, that a little bit helps, and a little bit more helps a little bit more. As somebody who spends too much time on her phone as it is, but has also learned to see the goodness and the tools that my phone offer me, to set something that dings, and that ding is an alarm, not for you have a meeting now or whatever, it's time to wake up, but that ding is grateful, ? Look around, right? And that we see something that we know, like my habit, your habit might be like, as I cross the threshold of this particular place, what could I express gratitude for? What could be the outward invisible sign that reminds us to do this thing? As somebody who grew up struggling to write thank you notes under the tutelage of my mother, and probably owes people thank you notes because I feel like I always do, letter writing, which is both a gift, as they say, for the giver and the receiver, right? My practice of writing those thank you notes is my practice. It's my expression of gratitude, and I receive the internal benefits of living in a place of gratitude. And obviously, the person who receives the letter then is like, hey, I got to thank you. That's so lovely. Yay, like that is a dual benefit. And it doesn't have to always be on stationery. It can be a text. It can be an email. I mean, I know that there are protocols for certain kinds of thank you notes for certain kinds of situations. But even just saying, hey, thanks, that is enough. Any gratitude is gratitude, and any expression of that can be building this practice. And the easiest way is just to say it. Thank you. Thank you to the person who just handed me my coffee through the window. Thank you to the person who showed up in a hard time. Sometimes that person is not available to us to thank. And as strange as it might seem, still going through the movement and the motions of expressing gratitude to somebody. So my third grade teacher, I'm grateful to her, right? She's not standing in front of me, but I can say, thank you for reading us Trumpet of the Swan, because wow, And so when you're in your car, whatever it is, and there's something about the vocalizing of it, the saying it out loud, whether that person is there to hear it or not. Again, the benefits of a grateful life are mostly for ourselves. So those are a few ways to practice some gratitude. Other ways that you have either given or received some gratitude or remembered to give thanks. Yeah, Jill.
I found this season of the river to be very, very interesting and expository. Like literally, it's so low and there's so much sand there.
Right.
I always pictured the bottom of the Mississippi River as some place of like tires and toilets and slimy.
Uh-huh.
And you can see for my neighborhood, you can especially see the what is the girders that hold up the bridge, right? Is that what is the
Yeah, the pylon, whatever yeah.
yeah. And it is, I mean, it is like as I watch them, as I have seen them, I think I'm really grounded, right? Like this bridge is really grounded, and I'm really grounded.
That's lovely. Yeah.
And there is a structure supporting it. The bottom, there's a bottom, and
It is firm. Yeah, there's a bottom and it will hold. Yeah, that's such a beautiful metaphor, and that it's revealed in a time that's kind of problematic, right? Like this is troubling that the river is so low, but that it's a visual reminder of all that literally holds us up, right? That makes me think, somebody else, other folks. Yeah, Kate.
I've been pleased and surprised when I send a pastoral care card out, how sometimes I've actually gotten responses.
Right. Which can set up a vicious cycle, right? I'm going to thank you for your thank you note, and then you're going to thank me for it. Yeah, no. Right, because what is that, why is that pleasing? Can you name when you've sent a card and someone acknowledges?
Number one, I'm surprised. It's like, oh, this person?
Yeah.
I sometimes even know.
Don't even know the person, right? Yeah.
But the fact that I went out of my way, out of my care notes,
Uh-huh.
went out of their way to thank me for care.
Yeah, right. And it does kind of then create, I said a vicious cycle, but it actually creates a beautiful cycle of acknowledgement and naming and seeing each other and being seen. Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
For me, just being mindful of what I'm thinking or feeling in certain moments, and almost like checking yourself.
Right.
Why am I feeling this way?
Mm-hmm.
Looking for that maybe 3% of gratefulness. Sometimes I'm sitting at the sink at night doing dishes, and my mind is like,
Dishes, yeah.
but then I'm like, I'm very thankful and grateful I have all these people to feed
Right.
and clean
Right.
up for, and or
think that's exactly right. And it's just a question of attention, right? Like to pay attention to the moment that we're in and to think about not just, I mean, dishes, yeah, they're, but to reframe that as we just had a great meal and I just sat at table with people that I love, you know, right? To be able to see in that, even in a chore, an expression of gratitude. And that's about attention and kind of reframing and giving mindfulness, I think. Yeah, absolutely. What I was thinking about as you guys were sharing all of your own versions of that is there's a great book, ultimately. I think it started as a Twitter thread, but it turned into a book, as things are prone to. This guy, and somebody will remember his name before I finish the story. He's written several books, and he wants to say thank you for the cup of coffee. So he says thank you to the barista, right, who hands him the cup of coffee. And then he gets curious, paying attention, and he decides to figure out, he wants to thank everybody who contributed to that cup of coffee. So the other workers in the store, okay, not so hard. The person who brought the beans, the delivery guys, the truck drivers, the people who grew the beans, the people who built the roads upon which the truck was driven, the cup maker, right? And so he spends like a year trying to track down all the people that it's necessary to say thank you to for his cup of coffee. And I think about that when you think about the bridge girders or the pylons, what all the things that hold our lives up, right? An expression of gratitude and the invisible work that we often don't see. Okay, how not to. So we were talking earlier about envy and those kind of darker emotions that can color our experiences. Not original to me, comparison is the thief of joy. So if I'm comparing mine to yours, whatever mine is, my life, my things, my meal, my relationships, my job, whatever, when I'm in that kind of comparative mindset, it's real hard to be joyful, right? But if we flip it around, when I'm in that space of gratitude for all that I do have, it's real hard to be envious, right? So it is kind of like they do block one another out. So when we're comparing our lives together, we're struggling a little bit in the gratitude expression. Shoulding on ourselves, almost back to our bathroom conversation, saying you should be grateful for that. Okay, did anyone ever feel grateful when somebody told you should feel grateful for that, right? This is going to make you feel better. So that kind of like that pressurized gratitude. If you're not feeling it, I mean, there is something to be said of like kind of fake it till you make it, but this like this place of like I ought to feel, I should feel, is a real dark place to live in, and it can be a real hard place. And it's parallel to this toxic positivity, right? Of always look on the bright side. Always say, there's something I can learn from this experience. It's going to be great. Sometimes things are hard, and you might not be ready to say thank you yet, right? So giving ourselves permission, as much as this is a whole talk about expressing gratitude, that it's not compulsory, that it's not always at our lips. It's not always right there, and that's okay too, right? And that forcing ourselves or forcing people around us, you should be grateful for all that you have, young lady, is not going to engender the actual spirit and the gift of it. Okay. There's a lot about gratitude in the Bible, y'all. All the way through, from beginning to end. If you look up, thanks or Thanksgiving in the Bible, Google will search for you for a long time. One of the more regularly offered verses is this from 1 Thessalonians. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. So I put this right here, right on the heels of a mention about toxic positivity and shoulding, because this is the tension. This is where we have to do some work of discernment. This is where we live. We live in this place of, kind of back and forth between these places. This can feel impossible some days. This is the radical nature of gratitude. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. So threading through, acknowledging that there are times when we're not quite ready, when we need somebody else to express gratitude on our behalf until we're ready, whatever that might be, whatever that pause in that moment is real. And yet also there is this just completely radical, hard, challenging idea that it's possible to give thanks in just about any circumstance. It's possible. So whether that feels impossible or whether that feels radical, that's where the work is for us. And it's a work of attention and discerning, of paying attention to what we're feeling inside and to the larger world around us. What can we name? What can we see? Okay. So I have 2 poems for you today. There are copies of them on your tables if you'd like. They're up here, but the font was funny. So the first one, it's not hard to find when you are looking for poetry on gratitude. Then there's Mary Oliver, who has a poem called Gratitude. You're like, okay, great, done. I had actually gone looking for a poem that she wrote called The Place I Want to Get Back To, which is a poem that ends with her naming her kind of home place Grateful. She names her house and named this place Gratitude. But I found this one too, so we'll read this one. And it's set up as a series of questions, question and answer. What did you notice? The dew snail, the low-flying sparrow, the bat on the wind in the dark, big-chested geese in the V of sleekest performance, the soft toad patient in the hot sand, the sweet hungry ants, the uproar of mice in the empty house, the tin music of the cricket's body, the blouse of the goldenrod. What did you hear? The thrush greeting the morning, the little bluebirds in their hot box, the salty talk of the wren, then the deep cup of the hour of silence. When did you admire? The oaks letting down their dark and hairy fruit, the carrot rising in its elongated waist, the onion, sheet after sheet, curved inward to the pale green wand. At the end of summer, the brassy dust, the almost liquid beauty of the flowers, then the ferns, scrawled black by the frost. What astonished you? The swallows making their dip and turn over the water. What would you like to see again? My dog, her energy and exuberance, her willingness, her language beyond all nimbleness of tongue, her recklessness, her loyalty, her sweetness, her strong legs, her curled black lip, her snap. What was most tender? Queen Anne's lace with its parsnip root, the everlasting in its bonnets of wool, the kinks and turns of the Tupelo's body, the tall blank banks of sand, the clam clamped down. What was most wonderful? The sea and its wide shoulders, the sea and its triangles, the sea lying back on its long athlete's spine. What did you think was happening? The green beast of the hummingbird, the eye of the pond, the wet face of the lily, the bright puckered knee of the broken oak, the red tulip of the fox's mouth, the upswing, the downpour, the frayed sleeve of first snow. So the gods shake us from our sleep. So her world, Mary Oliver's, was a world that was grounded in being outside And so her list, her answer to these questions is just an extraordinary just flow of images from the world that she observes. And that might ring true for you as well. You might be one of those people who can name the birds by their songs and recognize these moments. Or it may be something else that you could make a really, really detailed list about, right? The qualities and attributes of your child, the taste of certain foods, what it's like to prepare them, right? Music. Whatever that thing is for you that you're like, yeah, you know what? I can do that. Again, it might be the view of the woods, but it might be something else, some other place, some other set of experiences for you that you can delve into this kind of richness. And so some questions you might ask, which is the title of another of her poems. These are the questions from the poem. What did you notice? What did you hear? When did you admire? What astonished you? What would you like to see again? What was most tender? What was most wonderful? What did you think was happening? Are questions that we might use as a different kind of gratitude prompt. I can make a pretty good thank you list, but this takes me to a different place. And part of where it takes me is into a place of detail, of really noticing, which is the first question, of giving my attention to something. So I offer that list to you, which is embedded in the poem that you have, as a different kind of practice, as a different way into an expression of gratitude. And I wonder if anybody has either a line from this poem that we've just heard, or if you would answer one of those questions yourself from a different kind of piece of the manifold world. Anybody have a line from the poem or something that made you think about that you could express that kind of detailed appreciation for? Yeah, Madge.
Two things have been coming to mind as I've listened to all of this, and this sort of focuses in on it. One, yesterday, a bitter cold day, Whit and I worked the downtown market, and we were working the booth for Carrington and Alex Watts. And 2 spots down from us was the Thistle and Bee booth. We started the day grateful for multiple layers of clothes, candy warmers, and so on and so forth. And at a point, I was talking to one of the ladies working the Thistle and Bee booth, and she's fairly new to the program, and it was the first time that she had worked a market, and she said, as she looked around, she said, I've never been to a market like this before, and I'm amazed by people who are here as families, because I never had family growing up. I never had this closeness.
Right.
And that led to, on this bitter cold day, discussions of her gratitude for her new beginnings and the life she was building. So that was thing one. Thing two, and I'll try to get through this. Many of you know that about a month ago, the house that my daughter and son-in-law live in was destroyed in a fire, and they lost virtually, well, not virtually everything, but almost everything. And in their period of transition, as they were looking for the place that would be their temporary home, they found an older apartment complex, and one of the primary reasons that they decided on this particular apartment was that it had hardwood floors, and the planks were the 1 or 1.5 inch planks that had been in the house. And the comment was, we can walk barefooted in here, and it feels like home.
Mm-hmm.
Gratitude.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, thanks. I think, too, listening to your stories, Madge, which I'm appreciative of, and I'm really appreciative of the way in which you just told them, because there's a temptation, right, when we meet somebody whose life is more difficult than ours to say something like, I'm so thankful that's not my story. And that's back to how not to do it, right? Or to say to your children, well, you ought to be grateful that you have a place to land. You know, again, there's no just the honoring that this is the story and these are the things and this is how it is, and then pulling out the thread of gratitude rather than a kind of a compulsory, like, or again, that comparative of like, there but for the grace of God go I, which is not exactly a very pastoral thing to say. So thank you for that. Thank you for not just your stories, but the way that you shared them. I'll leave these, the questions are, like I said, are embedded in the poem. So if you want perhaps later to do your own little experience of something that you can really kind of name in really particular ways. I don't know what that might be, but I hope that it might be an exercise for you. So our second poem is a very different tone. It's by a man named W.S. Merwin. It's called Thanks. So again, easy to find when you're Googling poetry on these themes, but this one has actually been in part of my life for a while. And it acknowledges what's hard, and I think gets us back to this question of the radical nature of gratitude. Thanks. Listen, with the night falling, we are saying thank you. We are stopping on the bridges to bow from the railings. We are running out of the glass rooms with our mouths full of food to look at the sky and say thank you. We are standing by the water, thanking it, standing by the windows looking out in our directions, back from a series of hospitals, back from a mugging. After funerals, we are saying thank you. After news of the dead, whether we knew them or not, we are saying thank you. Over telephones, we are saying thank you. In doorways and in the backs of cars and in elevators, remembering wars and the police at the door and the beatings on stairs, we are saying thank you. And the banks, we are saying thank you. In the faces of the officials and the rich and of all who will never change, we go on saying thank you, thank you. With the animals dying around us, taking our feelings, we are saying thank you. With the forests falling faster than the minutes of our lives, we are saying thank you. With the words going out like cells of a brain, with the cities growing over us, we are saying thank you, faster and faster. With nobody listening, we are saying thank you. Thank you, we are saying and waving, dark though it is. So this poem is a hard one, and it does bring us to that place where we were a few moments ago of acknowledging and where we started really in the prayer of those disappointments and failures that are part of our lives, of all that is dark, and then trying to insist underneath that, insist even still on, I will still say thank you for this life that I have, and even in this moment, for whatever it is that we can kind of muster a little bit of gratitude for in the face of it all. Where's the line that I was gonna? The radical. This is where the other piece of the radical nature of it comes in. Of like, whatever you might throw at me, I hold some. I want to say power, and it's partially that, but it's also just my own integrity. I can still say thank you, right? Like I can still find that place and that space that I won't let the darkness, the beatings, the bankers, whatever it might be that comes at us, take that from me, take that from us. And again. I want to keep acknowledging that it's hard and it's not it's compulsory and it's not, right? We want to be honest and we want to name the things, and we also want to still be able to say, I'm not going to let this this experience, this world, this person, whatever it is, take something from me that I'm not willing to give it. That I'm going to continue to say I can still say thank you, thank you, thank you in the face of all of this. I wonder if there's a reaction or a response or a line of this poem that strikes you. This is some of the grist and the grit of it that makes it tricky and hard to even talk about, but certainly hard to practice. Okay.
I don't know if I'm missing the point here or not, but when a lot of those things, when I say that you're saying thank you, that it wasn't me who got shot, or
Right. Yeah, and I don't think he's doing that.
okay.
Right.
Because it sounds very selfish to me. That thank you that I'm in a place that I was personally affected by.
Right. My read on this, and I think that's a fair interpretation, and it's like I said, it's a tricky space to inhabit. And I appreciate your naming. My response to this is true, that these things are happening. And sometimes they're happening to me. And this is true, that I can still see beauty in the world, I can still experience love. These things can be true at the same time, and not in a comparative or I've escaped them kind of way, but this is part of the world that I live in that touches me. And I'm going to still, take a breath, and it may take me a minute, may take me more than a minute, to summon some sense of gratitude. That's how I come at this. That it's a truthful, honest. That it's not all. I think Mary Oliver was very honest about the state of the world, but it's not all wrens and robins, right? And that there's still an expression of gratitude to be offered. Yeah, Scott. Yes. Yeah.
Somebody's being thankful at the same time, and I can't be.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
This is happening, doesn't get covered in the news like the awful stuff.
Right. Right. That we are connected. And again, this takes us back to that sense of like things that I receive from other, but I'm also connected to all that's hard. Right. Which is a great segue, almost like he knew where we were going. We'll end there if we have time. We'll get to both quotes. This is Walter Brueggemann, who says, this is helpful to know in a minute. This is a longer article that's actually a really extraordinary piece responding to some anti-Semitism and several events that had happened when he wrote this. So that's why there's a nod to Judaism in the middle of it. Also, he's a Hebrew scholar. Imagine having a sacrament named thanks. That is what Holy Eucharist means, right? The Great Thanksgiving. We are on the receiving end without accomplishment. We put out our hands. Without accomplishment, achievement, or qualification. It is a gift, and we are grateful. That moment of gift is a peaceable alternative that many who are weary and heavy laden, cumbered with a load of care, receive gladly. The offer of a free gift, faithful to Judaism, might let us learn enough to halt the dramatic anti-neighborliness to which our society is madly and uncritically committed. A lot in here. But it is a we game, right? It is about a we. The sacraments, we don't do them alone. Clergy are prohibited I can't go have communion by myself. I'm not allowed to. We come together and we do these things. And what you can believe today when I can't quite holds all of us up, right? So we come together with all of our stuff, good, bad, in the middle, and together we do this sacramental giving thanks. And that changes us as a larger body and community, and it changes us as individuals inside of that body and community. And that's a weekly, for some people more often, for some people less often, practice of giving thanks for something that I had zero to do with. Zero. And I put out my hands and somebody puts bread in it. No matter what. It's kind of just astonishing sometimes. Imagine having a sacrament named thanks, and we do. What does that mean? That is to say, there's a profound possibility if we were to practice giving thanks as if it were a sacrament, a holy practice, because it is, there's a profound possibility for our own ability to resist and even transform from the ugliness manifested in our world from the crowd, silencing and ignoring the victim, toward the presence of Jesus. Practicing gratitude, giving gifts thankfully in service of others could transform us into people capable of asking, what do you want me to do for you? So this practice then transforms the ugliness, the darkness of the world and pushes back against that from the crowd, from the silencing, all of this. Again, he's responding to a particular event. But and then what happens next is not just that I said thank you, but that I am changed. And what might happen next is that I might say, what do you want me to do for you? This was done for me, whether it was gloves in the pocket or bread in my hand or whatever it might have been. The more I receive that, the easier it is for me then to say, okay, now what might I do? How do I turn that around? The cycle that Kate was describing of I wrote this note and this person wrote me this note, right? How does that then continue to spiral in the best of all possible ways? And I'll end here with this, and we'll talk a little bit. This quote is from Brene Brown. It's funny to me because it's attributed to Barbara Brown Taylor, but if you really dig around, it's actually Brene Brown. We get our brown Episcopal women people confused. To become fully human means learning to turn my gratitude for being alive into some concrete goodness. Again, this is like, so we do all the gratitude work, and then what? How do we then live on the other side of that? It means growing gentler toward human weakness. It means learning to forget myself on a regular basis in order to attend to the other selves in my vicinity. You could say gratitude, as understood in the Christian mind, is not just a sentiment. Gratitude is a discipline. We have to work at it. We have to practice it. It is a part of our resistance to the powers and principalities of this world. So where we have kind of meandered our way through, hopefully, is from this practice of gratitude and the times when it's easy and simple or even pro forma, but that is a muscle memory that we're developing, to this ability to maintain and hold on to a grateful perspective in a way that resists and pushes back, in a way that is radical, in a way that says, it's hard out there, y'all. And not in a comparative way, not in an I'm so lucky I've got mine, but in a I will still hold on to thankfulness. I will still put out my empty hand and receive bread. I will still acknowledge that so much is also beautiful and extraordinary that I had nothing to do with making it so. So from Brueggemann or Brown, these ideas of the practice and the radical nature of it, and the resistance of it, but also the sacramental nature of it. I wonder what you hear now, or thoughts at the end of this meandering conversation, what you would say about what is helpful and guiding for you about a gratitude practice. Yeah.
I think everything that we talked about, that you talked about today, underscores the danger of what we all do, and that's taking so much for granted.
Right, yeah. It's the opposite of that, right, yeah, yeah.
Just think about everything we do in this fast-paced life that we live, whether it's relationship with our spouses and the wonderful things that they do for us, walking through the woods late in the afternoon and the sunlight comes through the trees and you stop and you just look at that and you're just amazed by it, and you see people just doing their jogging and running through the woods and so forth, not paying any attention to it, or a glorious sunset, or all of the gifts that we have. Everything that's been underscored today, from the questions in the first poem, all those questions. Just think about each one of those. Think about what Walter Brueggemann said, and it just really underscores to me the fact that we cannot take anything for granted.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that's true, and it is about, as so many of you have said and acknowledged, the things that you pay attention to, the things that catch your vision, the things that help you kind of reframe or tell yourself a different story in the midst of something. Anyone else? Yeah.
My takeaway is that I have done things for people because I wanted to, and then I found myself being resentful when it wasn't reciprocated, or it wasn't, I didn't receive a thank you for doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that takes away the joy. It makes me
Yeah.
feel like replacing my doing something nice with feeling bad. And
Yeah.
angry. So
Yeah.
I'm going to have to really, really work on it.
Yeah, and I think acknowledging that's how we are, right? Like, we're a little bit wired to be like, okay, could you please pat me on the back and say thank you, right? Or that resentment can grow. And I think that, again, like, one of the things that we've seen or at least proposed is that these practices of expressions of gratitude and acknowledgement and whatever, they do push back against that, right? And it's hard to feel these opposing, it's not impossible, it's hard to feel these opposing emotions at the same time. That's true. Yeah, Bill, and then, yeah.
Yeah, there's something about this idea we have to practice it, we have to work at it.
Mm-hmm.
Suggests that it's ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And there also seems to be some kind of responsibility. That it's not just words. It's fine to say thank you or write a note, but then what, I can't quite figure it out, but there's something about an action or an activity or an ongoing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And trying to figure, and I don't know exactly what that is either, but there is something about that it's not a one and done kind of thing, right? That it's something that is really just a perspective and a way of kind of being in the world that is closer to that. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was, when Whit was talking, it made me think that, and Bill too, that the giving, the thank you act has to be preceded by, or like the natural things that precede that are stopping and looking.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That it is the sort of thing that we can do repeatedly, but that's sort of the cycle, is that you have to stop and look.
Right. It's not just that a thing happens, it's that we acknowledge and appreciate or see it. We stop and pause and say, oh, this thing happened. And so then, right, we don't just let it kind of blow by us. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to say. Did you ever hand up a second? Yeah.
I feel like I always feel like if I can't do it the way I imagine it should be, and so that pressure to like, I really should write
Mm-hmm.
it out, or but just like you said, a quick text or an email just gets it there.
Right. Yes.
And it means so much to me, just 2 sentences from someone.
Right.
It's not perfect, but
I live in that world too, where the perfect can be the enemy of the good. But yes, right. So lowering the stakes a little bit and just saying it, and maybe more comes later. Maybe you do get around to the stationery and all of that, but to not let the moment escape us. Yeah, yeah. Bill.
That last sentence is great. I don't know what to make of that. I'd love to hear what other people.
To push back against our resistance to the powers and principalities of the world. Yeah, I think that's the Merwin poem. I think that's out there, y'all. It's hard. And I'm going to still express some, whether it's a crumb or a feast of gratitude. Yeah. Heidi, and then I have to go change.
I think that to me feels very clear that, power comes from fear. People are unsettled or fearful when they, will follow perhaps a leader who might be authoritarian or not have that good in mind. But if we're grateful, then I think we're more, we act better. We're grateful. We don't just follow a knowing. This is resistance.
I think we make better choices when we're not operating from a place of fear. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, y'all keep chatting. I'm going to go put on some church clothes. Thank you. I express gratitude to you for this conversation. Thank you.